Hi, it's Dr. Fox, licensed psychologist in the state of Texas. And in this video, we're going to talk about what's wrong with your memory. And we're going to look at emotions in memory, memory and negative information, and why you have difficulty recalling memories. Now, I've gotten requests from a wide variety of different folks who have written and reported difficulty with their memory and pulling up old memories, recalling those memories. And many of them have BPD. Many of them have other personality disorders as well. So we're going to focus on this video specifically with BPD, but I think that the research can also be generalized to many other types of personality disorders as well. So let's get into it and like, share, and subscribe. And here we go. Now, memory is influenced by emotional content. Now, the research shows that emotional information interferes more strongly with information processing and learning in individuals with BPD as opposed to those who don't have BPD. So what we know about BPD is that there's a lot of emotions that always seem to be bubbling underneath the surface, right? Sometimes they bubble over and individuals may engage in those maladaptive patterns that can be destructive, that can be harmful to self and others and things of that nature. And particularly if we're talking about emotions, right? So when you're particularly emotionally activated, it's hard to take in information because all your energy and focus is on whatever has triggered that emotion. So it's hard to encode, to take in what happened, what's occurring. So when you recall it, you end up with something called confabulation. Confabulation is that we don't actually remember 100% of what happens. Let's say typically we may remember 85% if we're lucky, 75%, and over time that degrades. So what happens, what our brain does, because our brain wants us to have a complete picture, it adds in those pieces. And those pieces may be accurate, they may not. But what's interesting is when we talk about confabulation, which is filling in those spots, so we believe that it's 100% of our memory, we firmly believe that 100% of that memory is accurate, even though the research shows that it's not. And this research was done in the 50s and the 40s, and some was even done in the 30s. So we find this same evidence over and over again. But when we talk about initial encoding, when you have an emotional reaction or that intense emotional feeling or that bubbling up, you're not encoding all of what you're experiencing because your memory, right, and your emotions are missing each other. So it becomes very distorted, but confabulation is absolutely at play. Now, next, let's talk about that memory and negative information. In general, individuals with BPD do not seem to differ from those who don't have BPD in their ability to memorize emotional information. But they do tend to have specific difficulties forgetting negative information. So what this says is that individuals with BPD, they are prone to that negative information, and it's really hard for them to forget it. They may really lock onto it. Now, we know that individuals with BPD, and if you've seen my other videos as well, and I talk about this, that there is that tendency, and the research supports this, that it is skewed towards a negative. When individuals with BPD see a rather neutral facial expression or situation, they skew it towards the negative. They see it as potentially harmful, potentially rejecting, or potential abandonment. So what happens is that negativity gets locked in, and individuals with BPD have trouble letting go, forgetting that negative information. So if it's harder to let go of that negative information, that means the negative information has a greater impact on your perceptions, your beliefs, your patterns, and how you feel about yourself and others. Also, those with BPD seem to recall autobiographical, particularly negative events with stronger arousal than those who don't have BPD. And that goes exactly to what I mentioned just a second ago, right? Is that it's those experiences that you had, it's harder to let them go. It's harder to lessen their intensity because there's so much emotional content wrapped around it. But remember, I talked about that confabulation. Now, I'm not saying that anybody's negative experiences or negative events or anything like that are false, What I'm saying is that we have to understand that our memory gets filled in by our brain to make a complete picture. And all of that negativity makes it harder to let it go, which is why that impacts those memories. Why can't you let go of those things? Maybe you're in therapy and you can't let go of some traumatic experience in the past and you have to keep working through it. And the more that you work through it, the more repetitive you are in exploring it, pushing back on it, the easier it will be for you to let it go. Because again, we are adaptive and habitual creatures. The more that you access, right, those memories or that experience, and do it with a mental health provider, don't do it by yourself, particularly if you're prone to self-harm or if you're prone to very impulsive acts of harming others. Don't do that, right? You want to do it with someone who's trained, who understands what they're doing. That's really important. So what you want to do is you want to revisit it. It's like this, right? Imagine that you've seen the movie Rocky 75 times. And if you haven't, that's awesome. Try this. See it the first time and then write down how much you liked it. Then watch it 25 times, because you're probably already like, I'm not doing that. But watch it 25 times and then write how much you like it. Now on the 75th time, write how much you like it, but how impactful it is. You probably don't like it a whole lot, right? Certainly there might be some negative stuff, but you're also bored with it. And you're kind of like, which is why pushing those memories out and not addressing them and looking at them, teasing them apart, that it is so impactful because it's attached with those emotions. And that's sometimes what we do in treatment is that when the client is ready, they'll bring it up and we'll revisit it continually, maybe from different vantage points in different ways. And what we do is we slowly start to piece it apart. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about sort of these negative experiences, negative arousal, and we see that a depressive mood seems to both deteriorate and negatively bias information processing and memories. And there is evidence, so the research does support, that dissociative symptoms impair learning and memory independently of the type. That means regardless if it's good, bad, happy, sad, frightening, whatever it may be. So those depressive spirals, because we know individuals with BPD experience that depressive spiral. It may not be a full depressive episode, but it's a depressive spiral, right? Where you feel kind of down. You feel maybe a little sense of hopeless, a little more sense of worthlessness, a little more sense of helplessness. And that sadness is a little deeper. It's a little heavier. And what happens is that under those states or within those states, that your information processing in your brain is skewed even more towards the negative. Remember I just said a second ago, is that those neutral faces, those neutral situations are skewed negative. And then if you add the depressive emotions, right, or depressive mood, then you're skewed even more towards the negative. Now, what about recalling memories, right? What about pulling them out? Well, individuals with BPD have difficulties recalling specific autobiographical memories. Now, these difficulties are related to their tendency to disassociate, just like we talked about with the depressed mood, and it may help them to avoid episodic information that would evoke a negative emotional response. So we're seeing somewhat of an adaptive component here, right? That it is difficult to pull out some of those really intense emotions, right? And some of those intensive memories that our emotions are attached to, so that we're better able to manage your emotional reactions. So we see that it's a bit of an adaptive strategy. However, over a long period of time, we all know, right, that things pop up one way or another. And what happens is it's not pushing it away. It's not like saying, oh, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm not going to deal with it. This is that difficulty recalling it. So it's more of an actual adaptive response, but it's not a willful one. It's sort of a automatic management style. You could say it's a type of defense mechanism, perhaps, that you're not ready to handle it. So there's a sense of denial associated with it. And so you push it out, or it's difficulty to recall it because of the emotions that it could evoke, which could then drive very maladaptive emotional responses. So now that we've talked all about this, what can you do about it? You know, I always like to give you a tip. So remember, the tendency to skew negatively and you want to push back on those tendencies. You want to have positive pictures, make happy slideshows on your phone to help you remember positive information. Is this magically going to flip your mood from negative to positive or improve your memory? No, but it will significantly increase the probability that you're happier and that you can utilize a less skewed frame of reference, which may increase your ability to encode new information easier and more accurately. And that's what we want to do. You want to decrease the distortion associated with BPD and increase the authenticity that is your life and your world, because you are able to better manage it when it is authentic. Hope you found this helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.